Jail beckons for the pensioner gang who staged the Hatton Garden heist. The audacious £14 million jewellery raid was the biggest burglary in English history. It took the gang 2 nights to breach the vault. Today, 3 men were convicted of hiding the haul. Earlier, the ringleaders, all in their 60s and 70s, admitted their role in the crime.
They're just getting towards the 70s, thinking, I haven't got a pension to fall back on, let's do it. One for the road.
Also tonight, mourning a British Hollywood great. Alan Rickman has died of cancer at 69.
Growing pressure on Coe over the doping scandal after another devastating report. And
the only safe thing to do is track a new course back up online.
Leo leads the way as the Oscar nominations are revealed.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale.
good evening. A gang of ageing career criminals is facing a long stretch behind bars tonight after the biggest burglary in English legal history. The Hatton Garden jewellery heist was as carefully planned as it was audacious. But today, 3 men were convicted of involvement after the ringleaders, all in their 60s and 70s, had admitted their roles.
Diamonds, golds and sapphires worth around £14 million were taken from the safety deposit boxes over the Easter bank holiday weekend. Much of the haul is still missing, as is one of the gang. As Paul Davies reports, it was an old-school crime undone by modern detective work.
It was bold, it was brazen. On an Easter weekend, posing as workmen, they carried out the biggest burglary in English criminal history. While London slept, a CCTV camera captured the gang removing millions of pounds worth of jewels and other precious items in bin bags and wheelie bins. They had found a way into the supposedly burglar-proof vaults beneath London's famous Hatton Garden jewel district and helped themselves to the contents of more than 70 of the boxes where Hatton Garden traders kept their most valuable stock. This was the mess that was only discovered when business resumed after the holiday. Police surveillance cameras would later capture the elderly criminals reliving the burglary over a pint, enthusiastically gesturing to show how a pump was used to back up the drill and access a fortune. It was an old-style crime carried out by old-style villains, the ringleaders all pensioners with form. Danny Jones, Terry Perkins, Kenny Collins, and the man known as the Governor, Brian Reeder, now 76. He'd served time for his part in the Brinksmat bullion robbery 3 decades ago. The police now know that for years these seasoned criminals had been looking at Hatton Garden for one last and history-making job.
It's the most significant burglary in English legal history, and when you look at the planning, they were doing internet searches about the drill they would need to get into the vault as early as 2012.
The trial heard the ageing criminals had met up regularly at a North London pub to discuss their plans, using their free travel cards to get there. They had viewed YouTube videos of the type of drill they'd need to gain access to the fortified vault. It still took 2 attempts on 2 separate days before they broke through. This is an exact reconstruction of the vault's main defence. 20 inches of solid concrete wall that the raiders had to drill through. It took 2 attempts with 2 separate drills to achieve this. A hole, yes, but so narrow the gang would have to have someone very small or very thin to get through. Another indication of the planning that went into this operation. So thoroughly planned, they'd even obtained keys to the building opposite the vaults, which overlooked their target. At 75, Kenny Collins wasn't suited to a physical role in the robbery. Instead, he spent that weekend perched up here, acting as lookout, watching down Hatton Garden for a police response that never came. The gang's white van left with at least £14 million worth of jewellery and precious stones. Scotland Yard was left embarrassed. But it wasn't long before detectives were knocking on doors and making arrests. Secret mobile phone recordings, vehicle number plate tracing and CCTV led police to the criminals and landed the gang in court. Not the first men of a certain age to fall foul of modern technology. But detectives say it would be a mistake to glamorise their crime. The precious stones in these boxes represented the savings of many small businesses. One retired jeweller effectively lost his pension.
The thing is, if it's a safe deposit box, you don't insure because nobody asks what is there. I know it sounds like it's all funny stock, but it's not.
Not all gang members have been detained. This man with striking red hair, who the police call Basil, hasn't been traced. And neither has around £10 million worth of stolen property that is still missing. Paul Davis, ITV News, Hatton Garden.
The ringleaders, Brian Reader and Terry Perkins, had already served time for two of Britain's most notorious heists, Brinksmat and the Security Express raid in 1983. A former flying squad commander told ITV News they probably couldn't resist one last job. Rebecca Barry reports.
Most pensioners plan for a comfortable retirement, but Brian Reader and Terry Perkins took it one step further. With two of Britain's most audacious robberies already under their belts, they masterminded one last daring raid to outdo all the rest.
Police have only recovered £2 million from this, Britain's biggest cash robbery.
They'd spent years perfecting their skills. In 1983, a gang raided the Security Express headquarters in East London, getting away with more than £6 million. A much younger-looking Terry Perkins was convicted and sentenced to 22 years in prison.
Over the decades, the scene of the crime may have changed unrecognisably, but the criminal tricks of the trade that Terry Perkins learnt here clearly stayed with him, because the similarities with the Hatton Garden heist are striking. Both raids took place on a quiet Easter bank holiday weekend, and in both cases, millions went missing.
And any idea where the missing £4 million is?
No idea. We think we might know where some of it is, but it's a very small proportion.
Detective Superintendent Peter Wilton helped convict Perkins in 1985. So 3 decades on, his reaction to hearing he'd gone on to plot the biggest burglary in English history?
Flabbergasted. Absolutely flabbergasted. I almost laughed, because I thought, oh.
He says after a career in the criminal underworld, this was his swan song.
They're just getting towards the 70s, thinking, I haven't got a pension to fall back on. Let's do it. One for the road. Do your time. If you can stash some of the property away, it's there for when you come out.
Robbers got away with nearly 3 tons of gold bullion worth £26 million from the...
Also on the gang's CV of criminal achievements, the notorious Brinksmat gold robbery of 1983. Armed robbers stole £26 million worth of gold bullion from a warehouse near Heathrow. The man hiding his face is Brian Reader. He was jailed for 8 years for his part, but that didn't deter him from a life of crime, and he would become the governor of the Hatton Garden gang.
I think it's quite astonishing that Brian Reader, at his age, decided to be at the scene of a really serious crime, a burglary of this kind. Here he is, a career criminal who's been the target of Scotland Yard for years, turns up there. I can only think that he's completely infatuated with crime.
Some of the Hatton Garden loot was found buried in this North London cemetery, but many millions remain missing. So even though the ringleaders of some of the biggest crimes of the last century are now safely behind bars, their bounty is still out there somewhere waiting for them. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Right, let's go back to Paul Davis, who's at the scene of the crime. And the court case may be over, Paul, but much of the haul is still missing. What are the chances of recovering it?
Well, there's always hope, Mark, of course, but it's probably significant to know that the 2/3 of the property that is still missing contains the high-end jewellery. That's the most valuable stones, and they, it seems, were separated from the rest and quickly moved on. Now, the police are hoping that the missing man from the CCTV, the one they call Basil, will be able to help with that. They've renewed their £20,000 reward for information that leads to him. He's the man who had the keys to this building, and that bank holiday let the rest of the gang in. He's also the man identified today as being thin enough to slip through that hole.
All right, Paul, thank you very much indeed.
J.K. Rowling paid tribute to the actor Alan Rickman today, saying we have all lost a great talent. The 69-year-old who played Severus Snape in the Harry Potter films has died of cancer. He was admired for a huge range of roles on stage and on screen, and of course for that unforgettable voice. Nina Nanar looks back at his life.
If anyone here has any knowledge of Mr. Potter's movements this evening,
he commanded every stage.
I invite them to step forward.
Brooding, menacing as Severus Snape in the Harry Potter films.
Now.
That famous voice, deep and languid.
So when the time comes, the boy must die.
No wonder when the film world beckoned, he was the perfect villain, here as the Sheriff of Nottingham.
Loxley! I'm gonna cut your heart out with a spoon! Then it begins.
It began for Alan Rickman on the stage where he first rose to prominence, his talent recognised early on at the Royal Shakespeare Company. He would return to the stage throughout his career. Helen Mirren, who was Cleopatra to his Antony, today said he had a voice that could suggest honey or a hidden stiletto blade.
He would help you if you had a difficulty over a line or how to deliver something. He knew how to do it. He was immensely skilled and immensely generous. I can't think of anything other than huge praise to say about this man, and I'm so devastated that I shan't see him anymore.
Nice suit. John Phillips, London. I have two myself.
Rickman was 41 when he took his first big screen role in the huge hit Die Hard opposite Bruce Willis. Typically self-effacing, last year he discussed his Hollywood break.
I went to meet some casting directors, I went to meet some producers, and I think it was 2 days after I got there, I was offered Die Hard. Never made a film before, but I was extremely cheap.
He was also renowned for helping those trying to break into the industry.
A lot of people said what a guru he was, a real mentor to young actors and actors who weren't as established as him. Someone said he was one of the few actors who would go and see other people's performances and encourage them.
Today, Harry Potter star Daniel Radcliffe said he would carry the lessons he'd learned from Rickman for the rest of his life and career.
The actor Alan Rickman, who's died at the age of 69.
Such a great actor. Now, there are more searching questions for Sebastian Coe tonight after another scathing report into who knew what about doping within athletics. The World Anti-Doping Agency said corruption was embedded within the body Coe now leads, and it says some senior executives must have known about it.
But Dick Pound, the report's author, insists Lord Coe is the best person to lead the sport out of its troubles. From Munich, here's our sports editor, Steve Scott.
He'd already seen a copy, so IAAF President Seb Coe knew exactly what was coming his way in Munich. Today's report chronicled eye-watering corruption that involved deal-making with Russia over doping and then hiding what was going on.
Of course there was cover-up and delay and all sorts of things. You know, acknowledge this. I mean, if you can't acknowledge it, you're never going to get past it.
The report concluded that the former IAAF president, Lamine Diack, orchestrated the corruption. He was aided by a corrupt circle of senior officials who included his legal advisor, his treasurer and his son. It found that many more members of the IAAF knew about the problems than had been acknowledged, and the IAAF's awareness of the Russian doping scandal was far wider than it had claimed. The new president listened as his organisation was torn apart, but also won approval from the man who had suggested earlier Coe could have done more.
There's an enormous amount of reputational recovery that has to occur here, and I can't, if we're descending to personalities, I can't think of anyone better than Lord Coe to lead that.
Afterwards, Coe accepted the level of cover-ups, but not criticism that his was a sport still in denial.
This is an extremely serious situation for the sport to be in, and I don't for 1 minute. And if we've ever given the feeling or the interpretation that we are in denial, then I apologise for that. But that is absolutely not what the sport feels at the moment.
But there's no escaping the report's firm conclusion that those sitting at the IAAF's top table, which included Coe, must have known about the extent of the crisis. As a result, it's a question that will follow him around for some time to come. Steve Scott, ITV News, Munich.
Still to come here on the ITV Evening News, shares in Renault plunge after police raid on its car factories, and
Eddie Redmayne in The Danish Girl.
Charlotte Rampling in 45 years.
And Kate Winslet in Steve Jobs.
The British stars flying the flag in the Oscar nominations. Those stories and more right after the break.
Hello again, welcome back. 2 people have been killed in a suspected IS terror attack in the Indonesian capital of Jakarta. 5 of the militants also died. Explosions targeted a major shopping and business district, followed by a siege and gunfights. Our international affairs editor, Raggy Omar, has the latest.
This is the moment one of the terrorists set off his device outside a Starbucks in downtown Jakarta. We spoke to an Australian eyewitness who was only 50 metres from the blast.
When the bomb went off, we saw a big plume of smoke and a fireball that at the time sort of engulfed the car. And then obviously everybody was running around and running away. And I'd say I was looking down on probably about 150 people sort of spread across that intersection, all running and ducking.
This footage shows the devastation inside the cafe, which was filled with rush hour customers. Extraordinarily, eyewitnesses were even able to take pictures of the attackers as they hunted for innocent civilians to murder in cold blood. Remarkably, armed guards from business properties and local policemen were immediately on the scene and able to shoot dead several of the attackers before they could launch their attacks. The Indonesian government was swift in identifying who was to blame, the president saying this act of terror was the work of so-called Islamic State. Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country in the world and has had a number of jihadi groups linked to Al-Qaeda. Remarkably, it's been able to thwart major terrorist attacks for a number of years. But with some Indonesians having travelled to fight in Syria, one worry now is whether this attack was linked to returning fighters. Raggy Omar, ITV News.
And in response to terrorist attacks like that and the one in Paris, there are to be 600 more armed police officers in London. That'll bring the Met's total number of armed officers to 2,800.
A British aid worker who tried to smuggle an Afghan child into the UK from Calais has avoided a jail sentence. Rob Laurie told French magistrates that what he did was stupid, but he said he couldn't leave the 4-year-old in a migrant camp.
And parts of Scotland and northern England have been hit by severe snow. Many roads were closed, as well as 2 schools in Northumberland. Rain is forecast overnight, which could cause ice on untreated roads.
Billions of pounds were wiped off Renault's market value today when it became embroiled in the emissions scandal that has badly damaged Volkswagen. Our business editor Joel Hills is here. Joel, what's behind all this then?
Well, look, ever since VW admitted that it installed software in 11 million of its diesel cars, which effectively disguised how polluting that they actually are, there's been a concern that other manufacturers were at the same thing. They've all decided that they won't, and investigations are underway in Britain, in Germany, and indeed in France to ensure they're telling the truth. So when union officials in Paris revealed that there had been a raid on Renault's head office and 2 other sites, this is what happened to the share price. You can see it plunged initially by 22%, although it did go on to rally when the French government, confirmed that to date tests had found no evidence of a device being found. They still closed down 10%, though, wiping £2 billion off the value of the company. Shares in VW, BMW, Peugeot and Fiat fell too. The thing here is investors are nervous, Mark, that if this scandal does widen, they don't want to be holding a stake in a company that faces billions of pounds in fines and compensation. Here, the British government has asked the VCA to carry out tests. 7 models have been tested to date. So far, so good, 33 models to go.
All right, Joel, so this goes on. Thanks very much indeed.
And finally tonight, British stars have been nominated in all 4 of the main categories in this year's Oscars. Kate Winslet, Eddie Redmayne, Mark Rylance and Charlotte Rampling are all up for awards.
But most attention is on whether Leonardo DiCaprio will finally win an acting Oscar at his 5th attempt. Richard Pallow looks at whether this could be Leo's year.
For so long now, he has been one of Hollywood's leading men. But when it comes to the Oscars, never the man. Well, not until now, it would seem.
And the safe thing to do is track a new course back up online.
But Leonardo DiCaprio's portrayal of a hunter left for dead in the film The Revenant is finally tipped to end that sequence. Although at the premiere tonight in London, he was remaining coy about his chances.
I don't know how I would ever answer that question other than it's in other people's hands, and it feels great to be recognized, but the work's already done, so that's other people's decisions.
The big boy's gonna wash himself. Right.
However, any Oscar has remained elusive despite being first nominated, aged just 19, in What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
What we have here is Leonardo DiCaprio, who's on his 5th nomination. He was first nominated in 1994. So you do feel like it's about time. And if there was ever a role in which demands so much from an actor, that's The Revenant.
It would mean no Best Actor double for Eddie Redmayne after winning it last year, up this time for The Danish Girl.
It's a shame. Come on. What are you doing? Come on.
I'm not prancing around in the living room at this time of night.
While Charlotte Rampling enjoys her first ever nomination at the age of 69 as Best Actress for the small budget picture 45 Years. And with supporting nods for Kate Winslet in Jobs,
Fix it.
Mark Rylance in The Atmospheric Bridge of Spies,
You should be careful.
and Tom Hardy in The Revenant, it's the first time British talent has been recognised in all 4 main acting categories in almost 15 years. Richard Pallow, ITV News.
Unashamedly biased. It has to be Charlotte, doesn't it?
What first
Be
go
great.
at
First
68,
nomination
wouldn't it be
would be
great?
great. Yeah.
That is all for now. Tom Bradley, we'll be here with news at 10.
But from all the evening news team, have a very good evening.
Bye.